couple of words. Okay, good.
I'm out of the technology.
So, but yeah, so going back, so let's just start with that one and then we'll go into our discussion, our themes for tonight. The Matthew, same with, well, there's a lot more marks, the words. Okay,
I'm
good.
out of the technology.
Okay, good. Got that muted.
In English, Matthew has two T's,
Yes.
M-A-T, and I thought it was a typo.
No. Everyone can hear us though in our group over here? Yeah, everyone looks, okay, great. Yeah, then we'll start shortly with the prayer. So Matthew, naturally one of the 12, he was the tax collector. I think he also had the name Levi as well too in another one. So it's funny you say that because I actually have a child who's just 40 days in our church and the parents named him Levi. And I'm like, Levi?
Or Levi.
And I'm like, Levi? I'm like, oh boy. And I'm like, what do you want?
Simeon Levi.
And I said, what do you want? I'm like, what do you want the child's name to be baptized? And they're like, well, we actually don't know. They're like, Levi? And I'm like, Levi? I'm like, I know it's
baptized anybody in.
well, see, the problem is appropriately, you're supposed to give it a baptismal name that is in the canon of the Orthodox Church. Okay. But it's not to say that's a guarantee because I know multiple people who have names that are not after saints. Well, no, here's the timeout though. Not, I'm telling you, a lot of modern saints, we're talking about the last 400 years, are now getting the names that we've heard, Pericles, Heracles, Epaminondas, so there are saints. Saint Panagi, so instead of Panagiotis, there actually is a Saint Panagi. There's a Saint Christo who was a gardener, but like I think of like my father-in-law's dad, his name was Othon. There's no Othon. Othon was Otto. Otto's a German name.
Okay.
So it was the king. There's no Saint Othona. So I've looked. So you put that in the category of all saints. And there was a woman's name that I heard as well too. Well, Apollo exists now. Apollonos, I gave him. It exists.
My name is Elias. I'm a Jewish name.
Yeah, well, yeah, but then hold on. That breaks down everyone else because most of us.
It's a popular name in Greece.
Yeah, well, Elia took on a big reputation, especially from modern Greeks, because they would also put him at such a high degree because he was one of the greater of the prophets, and also his notoriety about him being like at the highest peak. So that's why they make chapels, put him on their mountains. They would praise him.
They used to have chapels.
Like even like you don't hear many Greeks saying Adam. Adam's Adam. I remember a soccer player who was playing for like the national team of Greece, and it was like Adam Papadopoulos. I said Adam. Well, you would think it was short. No, it was legit Adam. And they named him after Adam. What?
I have a cousin. Yeah.
In Greek? Greek?
Yeah, in Greek, he's in Cyprus.
Oh, wow. Well, Cyprus always gets a pass. You wanna know why? Cyprus is always old school, very biblical, traditional. That's why you guys have all these really cool, unique names with a lot of Cypriots. Greeks are so redundant and rigorous, especially in the ethnic attitude. The Demetriuses, the Georges, the Nicholases, you name, that's why we have so many of those names. That's why we get these foreign mix-ups. Like even mine, like I named myself Luke, but I don't have any Lukes in my family. But you think of it into that manner, and you can see that's why, like I said, I was saying Matthew, it's not a really popular. Okay, go to the churches. How many churches in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese are named after St. Matthew? I think there's maybe 2 in the entire archdiocese. Because what is the archdiocese? You know this. We have like 5 Demetriuses in Chicagoland. We have 4 Annunciations, 5 Gimeses. It's all those big Greek popular church names. Even us, Nectarius was foreign, right? He was started in 74. Saint Sophia was foreign. They're the only one. You know, I mean, like these weren't common. But then now, obviously, we know their notoriety. But when you go back to like the biblical, like Matthäus is not popular. Let's say not popular, it's just it wasn't common. Well, you don't hear many Greeks taking on the name of Matthäus. Ioanni is different, but you don't hear anyone celebrate Ioanni with a theologian. Most John celebrate the Baptist. And if you celebrate to theologo, you usually hear that like with monastics, because monastics will take on a monastic tantra name as theologo or Prochoros or Pachomios, you know, all those different unique names. So that's when they would celebrate those days. Same with St. Gregory Theologian. When someone's named Gregory, we got Greg on here, they celebrate in January 25th.
Hey, yes.
Yeah, January 25th is St. Gregory Theologian. Almost every Gregory celebrates on. But we forget the big luminary, Gregory Palamas, Gregory of the Enlightener, you name it, there's so many. You see, it's like we just kind of, and I get that too, like people tell me like, well, I want this one, I'm like, oh, well, there's this other one, like, oh, really? I don't know. They all just assume, it's all assumption, so that's why Mateos is not popular, and again, as we're very still have that ethnocentric, you're very gonna rare find someone named Mateos, Matthew, that's, I would define as Greek, right? Unless it has some interesting, like one I know, just to highlight, so I know the two that we know that are in our parish. We have Matt Stankiewicz, who I know Matt, I think, oh my gosh, he's gotta be maybe third generation from his
Yeah.
okay, a Greek American. And then Matt Publicus, but the Publicuses, they actually don't have ties to like modern Greece, would be more of Asia Minor. So again, that could be an example too, where they take on those attitudes from Byzantium or Cyprus. That's really like Cyprus. They get some really cool, unique names that you don't get in many other places. That's why I love, you're hearing all these beautiful variations in terminology about names.
Publicus isn't Gas.
His son is Matthew,
Ah,
and he's a Mateos.
I know.
Well, his sister's right there, and Michelle, and it's like a guessing game, but I always remember, but it takes me a while. She's a Marina after her yaya, right? Michelle, isn't your mom and dad, don't they have Asia Minor, Byzantium?
My dad's side does. more
Your
than
dad's
my
side, that's it.
dad's side, yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
so it shows some
This
cool,
is
unique.
Gus' daughter.
Yeah, that's Gus's daughter right there. Yeah, so.
Hey, hi, Kitty.
I'm
Asia Minor.
You're Asia Minor too?
Take any names and send, they grow up to become a saint, they'll get a day and then they'll be fine.
Well, hey, like I told all of you, I said, hope one day that you all become saints and I'll be commissioned iconographers to paint your murals and your icons so we can fill these churches.
Now
So,
Pericles is saying,
yeah, there's a lot of
my
Pericles.
brother's
I have a
Pericles.
question for you.
I thought.
When you look at the scene, so I've showed many people, so you know, like the daily readings, okay, and you have it on your phone. I mean, see, like today, just Matthew the Apostle and Evangelist. Tomorrow, look, you got Gregory the Wonder Worker right there. That could have been Gregory. You could celebrate tomorrow too if you want.
There's Gregory Decapolis too, Father.
Yeah, there's so many. Well, I always tease my father-in-law. My father-in-law's a Theodore, right? And again, it's the same example. Most Theodores or Theodoras celebrate on the third Psychosabato.
Mhm.
The third Psychosabato is the commemoration of the miracle of the Coliba from Saint Theodore, the Theodon, okay? But then I'm like, there's actually a day in February that they celebrate both Theodores, Stratilatis and Theodon, the commander. Then there's also separate days for each of them, Theodore and Stratilatis. And then there's like another 100 other Theodores, Studite, Decapolis, I'm trying to think of some other ones that are real, of like Byzantium. You'll hear all these random Theodores of all these other things. So what do I do in my sarcastic nature? I always text them whenever I read the Synexonia if it's a Theodore. I remember there's one time like Theodore the Recluse or like Theodore the Fool for Christ. I'm like, that's you for sure. You're definitely Fool for Christ. But just say it out of joking and habit ways. But it's really it just shows how we get these names and how complex they are and how we can recognize where we get our names and how our families kind of cultivate that. So, all right, well, let's begin with prayer.
Excuse me. Do you know what examillion is?
Yeah, it's a nation.
I have to, as a minor, I
Yeah,
have to ask my friend.
the bishop.
the bishop.
It's a titular title. It's a former see. It doesn't exist. Just like Mokisos, just like
Yeah,
God, what are other ones? Cappadocia, Nisa. These are not current sees. Sees means where bishop thrones were, metropolises or archdioceses. So now they give them to titular bishops because modern day bishops have modern sees. Nathaniel of Chicago, Tarasios of Buenos Aires, Emmanuel of France, right? That's modern. But if we didn't have these, it was all under one, then they would get all they're titled seats.
so
They're
probably Bishop.
of the Dardanelles. When Nikita
Never
was of the
went there.
Dardanelles were the islands off of whatchamacallit, by the Prince Islands, right? Off of Constantinople. Pringipos, another one. That's another one. Imbros is, but it's a minor one. It's not big. And what are they gonna do? They're gonna be bishops of that area? There's nothing there. There's ruins and
Not anymore.
goats. You want real sheep? They got real sheep and
So Bishop Timothy's probably doesn't have been to examillion.
no. And who knows? I actually don't know how they got that name, Examinion. Who knows how they got it, where it came from?
I'll ask you next time.
You gotta ask him. He's mentioned before, but it's pretty unique when you hear about some of these stories. So, okay, let's offer a quick prayer. Now we'll begin our discussion tonight. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Vasila furania paraklitos temos alifias, o panda kuparon que da panda pliron, o tisavros na agathon que zois korigos. El fe que esquinos sonimin, que cathari sonimas, o papas esquilidos, que sos son agathetas psychas imon. Amen. God bless you. Everyone, please be seated.
Okay. Sorry, I have two of them. One's a hard. I don't know.
Yes.
What was their first names? Say it again.
The first one is Hambis. And the second one is Chayvis.
First names?
Yeah,
Really?
Beast?
My first name is Xanthi.
Well, I know
Xanthi,
Xantipi.
Yeah.
Is it just Xanthi?
Yeah.
Nothing
Well,
longer?
Xanthi was.
So technically you'd be with Xanthi. So what's your baptismal name?
Shown here.
Baptism Xanthi. Without Xantipi.
I was not hers.
But
Well-
Levi is a name from the Bible.
Saint Demetrius was named after a pagan goddess, and he did okay though.
Well, like I said, you
Yeah,
become
right.
holy.
They don't-
I have no problem commemorating you in the books to come. That's my goal. That's my goal. So, all right. All right, do some screen share. And we will go from there. Okay, so tonight, everyone, we're gonna talk about the Eucharist. My theme for tonight, which was for the November 2nd meeting, which we had just a general discussion on the life of Saint Ignatius. We watched a little bit of the Man of God. We're getting back into our themes of the themes of the Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes in this one brought up was, blessed are those who participate in the Eucharist, for they will be satisfied. What does the Eucharist mean to you? What does it mean to you? Where is it in your totem pole of life? Is it the key? Is it the peak? Is it the climax? What is it? Because we know so much about it. We can learn more about it. How was it institutionalized? How do we receive it to modern day? There's so many things we can go.
These are the
But-
gifts you prepare to give us on the liturgy.
Okay, so what does it mean to you? What does the Eucharist mean to you?
To
I saw
clean me, to
to-
clean.
to-
It's
to
the
cleanse.
body and blood of Christ.
it's the body and blood of Christ. Yeah, what were you gonna say?
It's for the forgiveness of sins and for life everlasting.
Of course.
for your salvation.
Right, and then the question that I'm gonna ask the part two, for all of you, and this is not judgment, I'm not angry at anyone. So why don't we receive it often?
Receive where?
Often,
Why don't we?
yeah.
Well, I do.
So some do,
Used to. but I do.
some do, good. Others that don't, actually, well,
They're not
Most-
used to
I
it.
grew up where my mom said you don't receive it often because if you sinned and you didn't go to confession, you should not take communion. That's how I grew up.
that's, with love, that's
I grew up
Yeah.
that's the standard. That was a good standard. When I say good, I can't say it's wrong, I can't say it's right, but that's the common one. I had other ones about the Eucharist who would only come and take it like 3 times a year. Names Day, Christmas, Easter. To me, as a priest, it's very conflicting when you don't get participation in the Eucharist. The Eucharist is not offered for me, it's offered for all of us. It's offered for our salvation, it's offered for forgiveness, it's offered for cleansing. And these are why, if we believe what we believe, that's what my challenge is, to who Christ is. When I deny myself my participation in the Eucharist, then I have a lot of self-reflecting to really start doing. Because then why do we come to church? And why do we participate? Is it to be there to be at a production? You know, if you've kind of gotten the themes of our discussions and a lot of our activities, our themes from these adult spiritual enrichment classes, there are a lot of them always entail about engagement, participating in the services, in the worship. And naturally, when there's liturgies, you get more attendance. Doesn't mean they're going to participate. They're going to have more attendance because Vespers, which is the evening service, is very poorly attended because they're not getting anything. They're not physically getting anything. We are creatures of habit and of senses, of physical to receive, eyesight, of hearing, listening, taste, right? And to smell as well too. But that's why services that don't offer the Eucharist, like here's a hypothetical. This year for Christmas, it falls on a Sunday. The rubrics tell us that we are not allowed for Christmas Eve night to offer a liturgy. Can anyone give me a reason why?
You mean Saturday night?
Saturday is Sunday morning. And,
Well,
you know,
use a different word, it goes
Yeah,
into
yeah.
Sunday morning.
Right, yeah.
And so you can only do one
Yeah,
resurrectional liturgy. So, correct, so you're technically not supposed to offer another liturgy in that time frame. You can, it's like Tetris, you could play around with a piece. And if you have a second priest and maybe do the Orthodox liturgy late. But Christmas Eve, I think most people are like, they want to come to a service, maybe sing Christmas carols. If it's offered the Eucharist, great. If not, they receive it and they go with their families. I mean, late, I don't think people, I don't know if people want to be at church late to receive the Eucharist. If they can, there's one in the morning, there's one Christmas Eve morning and Christmas Day morning. So that's the options. I think that's what we're gonna do. I'm hearing from Brother Cordial what they're gonna try and offer for that evening one, but it's very difficult to manage. You have to have the help to do it. And then you also don't know who's gonna come and participate. Because the whole point of us offering the Eucharist is for people to partake. But we have a real struggle there because just as you said, Cynthia, about what you have been taught, and many people have been taught in that manner, it's not wrong. The problem though is if someone says like if you don't go to confession and fast, who can come and receive communion?
Well, that's why my mom never, I mean. hardly
I'm
ever
telling you,
did,
the old
because-
school ones.
And my grandma too.
Yeah,
I've had that
because they
too.
didn't take communion often,
Well,
We went to church every Sunday.
And you know what?
but they didn't take communion.
Right,
but you gotta, and it's all historical, circumstantial. When you're talking about war-torn countries, when you're talking about countries that were in occupations, when they were in type of slavery or whatever, first of all, it wasn't offered often anyways. So they couldn't partake into understand it because early Christianity, we're talking about from the early Christians, this was their goal. They wanted to make sure that anything they did throughout the day always began with them celebrating the liturgy. I mean, you do a liturgy every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you did one in the morning. Before they tended to that's why monastics, when they do their liturgies at 4 a.m., is because then once they've received that body and blood and they participated, then they begin their day. They have a small breakfast and they go. Well, that's what people used to do in early Christianity as well too. Because if they were tending their flock, tending their lands or whatever, stuff like they do, they would have a service before, right? They would offer their morning prayers and celebrations, participate in our co-work with the Eucharist of receiving the body and blood of Christ, and then to begin my day anew. But we have diluted that participation so much to modern day where we've actually pushed people away instead of encouraging people. And then you also get the issue that exists with like the pushing away of the communion is then situations where then people struggle. When I say struggle, it's personal, the environmental. Remember COVID? I mean, COVID for good, God, I'd say 6 months, the conversation arose just like it did it in the 80s with AIDS and other pandemics as well too, about is it safe to take communion? We all had those discussions. What is it? And it was like challenges. Do we need multiple spoons and multiple chalices? Who knows who's right, who's wrong, right? Everything was put into play. But the problem then is I would tell people, and I still tell people, it's up to the person. The answer when you have the Eucharist, it should be always self-reflective. But there's something very powerful there, is that even to the weakest person, to the strongest person, our Lord allows and wills appropriately. But the question is, how are you going to go receive that Eucharist? And that's the hard part, because you are given a breakdown, but we are not told, which I think it's still lacking as Christians, is to build a questionnaire, that schedule, that prayer rule, by speaking to your priest, and speaking to a spiritual father, so you can understand it. So then you can make it more of an effort, because anyone I've talked to, naturally, if you ask anyone who comes to church, say, how do you feel that you came to church? I feel good. It was nice. It was beautiful. I heard this. I heard that. It was great. And if you ask someone, how do you feel to receiving Holy Communion? I feel great. I have Christ. I'm with Christ. I sense Christ. Whatever it might be. That's what people say. So then I asked someone at the end, okay, so why not participate often? But did you hear what I just said? I said often, I didn't say every time. There's a big, yeah, no. You had it over there. No, it was it in the gym? I think it's in the gym with you. We'll double check. All right. We're not called to receive it every time. Even when I go to other churches and I'm not celebrating, I will also sometimes refrain from receiving communion. Either I wasn't prepared, I had something that morning or whatever. But the key word of preparedness is important because so we talk about the Eucharist. You understand, and that's key first. You have to understand that the body and blood of Christ. There's no questions about it. There's no metaphorical. There's no they are objects of it or whatever. It's like you have Christ in front of you. That's why has anyone ever seen a depiction of an icon of Christ in the paten? Has anyone ever seen that icon before? It comes from
Christ in what?
I'll show it to you. Like, this understands what I'm saying. I should put Orthodox. I think it was Saint. Oh God, what is his name? Is it Saint Peter of Alexandria? I'm gonna show you because it's very. Man, you know what? You guys are so lucky you have me as your priest. So I gotta tell you. Okay. My God, I got a good memory. So this is St. Peter of Alexandria. St. Peter of Alexandria was during the Arian heresy and understanding, and plus other heresies as well too, and understanding the duality of Christ, which was later on, but before understanding Christ, because what was happening was that Christ appeared to him on the paten. Now, this is not the paten, this is the tabernacle, okay, which will be covering the altar table. But remember, on the paten, you've got the square 4 pieces. That's ICXCNIK. That's the Lamb of God. That's the body that we take out of the prosopho, the bread that you offer. And he saw Christ there saying that they are tearing me apart. And in other words, and keeping me not unified. In other words, the bishops that were leading the flock, because of their heresies and false teachings, were actually dividing Christ instead of unifying Christ. Because even when we break the bread, it says broken but undivided, consumed but never eaten. Those are oxymorons, right? You get that? That's impossible. But what's the answer? What's impossible with man is possible with God, because you're receiving God. Okay. So in the icon, there's another one. There's some other parishes that had it, but like the symbolisms, like here, or then Peter's like saying like, who has separated you, Lord, and this and that. Oh yes, I was right. There's Hadeos. See, there's Arian right here, in defilement on the bottom, and a humble state on his knees because he saw or recognized obviously what he was doing in his heresies and separating himself and hurting the flock to understanding who Christ is. So there's another. I find it was so good. It's because I'm on Yahoo. Why Yahoo? I am a Google guy. So Saint Peter of Alexandria. Like it's really cool. I've also seen it in the back of altars. No.
That's another Peter, right?
Yeah. Who do you think I was talking about?
A Peter.
Peter wasn't from Alexandria.
No,
So then it was a different Peter. That's the vision of Christ. Oh, the seminary has it. See? Well, there you go. Can everyone see it? See right there where my cursor is? That's Christ and the paten and the chalice. And there's the star, the 4-piece, covering the body. And then this is the ayer, the cloth. Here's the chalice. And here's the paten. Get it? So that's the figurative, physical representation of Christ as the Lamb of God. Here, same thing. Christ is a child. Yep. There it is. And the chalice as well, too. Luke? No, it's not Luke. Okay. All right, so let's get out of this part. So when we're talking about the understanding of the chalice, we have to really symbolize to ourselves the importance of our general participation in it. And you remember, it also then goes, as I said, I already brought up history, we brought up forms, and I've already encouraged about how we need to speak to our spiritual fathers so we can start building up a prayer role to be participating more often. And I think that's the key, because I'll get to the point at the end of my discussion about the salvation point. But when we understand when the priest gives it, and he tells you, the servant of God received the body and blood of Christ for the forgiveness of sins and life eternal, it is that great physical offering, even from the spiritual sense of what our Lord is giving us to us from him. It's like it's always that continuous giving. And you hear all these hymns that almost relate to it. There are prayer service before called the pre-communion, not prayers, pre-communion service. There's a service before it that I try to read every night before I prepare for the next day. The morning of the service, we have the pre-communion prayers. And then we forget there's post-communion prayers as well as service. And those are prayers of thanksgiving. Why? Because we're giving thanks to God for our participation in the Eucharist, for his shedding of his blood, for us eating of them as well too. And that's why when you see what the liturgy, how it's created and what it does for us, I mean, that's the whole point. So that's why I ask people, so why do we go? Why do you then come to church? If you don't receive the Eucharist, what does the service offer you? That's the greater question that we have to ask ourselves. What?
The word.
The word. So that's another peak that's in the worship. What else does the liturgy offer to you if you don't participate in the Eucharist? You got the word, which is the gospel, the scriptures. What else?
Fellowship,
What was it?
Peace.
fellowship,
Fellowship. Okay.
community.
Peace. Okay.
Prayer.
Prayer. Right. Now the thing is the best part. Well, yeah, even to the word. All of those, except for the Eucharist, can be done personally or at any other junction. The institution, the Eucharistic prayer, and that connection with the liturgy, the liturgia, the work of the people, shows the importance of the Eucharist. We got to start putting a big emphasis back on the Eucharist, but more of the participation. I think we all get it, right? We see it. When the priest comes out and he holds out the chalice and everything else, we get it. But we got to start building a oneness in our hearts and minds about how I can strive to want it more and often. Because then, why do I do pre-sanctified liturgies during Lent? It's not done for me. It's done for the people to receive strength. And that was created by St. Gregory, the dialogist, who was a Pope of Rome around the 6th, 7th century, for the faithful to be sustained during Lent. This is not for us. Christ, with all due respect, it's irrelevant to him. You do what you're going to do. But when we are Christians and we are embodiments of Christ, and we are created in his image and likeness, and we're called to be with him. So the prayer question is, why do I deny myself Christ? Why do I deny myself the physical participation and relationship with Christ? Because we all can admit and complain, I don't see Christ. He's not with me. He doesn't tell me what to do, like right now in front of me. When we get into the spiritual attitude or psychological, I feel that he's with me. I believe that he's with me. I understand him or whatever, but we don't show the physical. Well, I don't need to. I have it there. In the institution of the Eucharist. Why don't I participate? Why do I deny? And I get it. And
People say that they feel guilty.
Yeah. The guilt is and good point, Nico. I do too. The guilt has to be overtaken by love, because that's what it is. If you don't recognize God's love, then you'll never be worthy to receive it. I brought it up before in other discussions when we talk about the Eucharist or any other things about belief, it's that proverbial like Indiana Jones, you gotta walk that path, especially the last crusade, and realize how you do with humility, you do with faith, and all those things, and then he was able to cross that figurative bridge to find the chalice, right? But the problem is that guilt amongst us really is something hard, because why? Where does the guilt come from?
Is guilt a mechanism that the devil
Yes.
puts on our way to separate us?
Excellent. The devil puts the shame on forgiveness and allows us to participate more in sin. Did you hear what I just said? The devil, it puts the shame on forgiveness so we can continue to live a life of sin. That's why we commit sin so often compared to asking for forgiveness often. Naturally, you would think it'd be kind of crazy that every action you did, you ask for forgiveness, but I mean, it might not be necessary to that level. But how often that should be is, that's how we're called to be with Christ, where if I am falling, or if I'm straying off the trodden path, or whatever it is, I should be able to try to reconcile and to get back on. If that takes humility, that takes forgiveness and repentance, well, then that's what I have to do. Well, what a coincidence. Your church offers you that all throughout the year. How does the church offer that to you? Reconciliation, repentance, and forgiveness. In what manners? So that I could feel somewhat worthy to receive his body and blood. In what manners? Give me some ideas. How's the church do that for you? And throughout the year.
Holy confession.
Confessions, one. What else? I made a hit with the year term. What does it do? It's a reminder, or they are reminders.
Prayer,
Okay. What are you
Holy
saying?
unction.
Any fasting period. Fasting periods are there to remind you. Retool, hey, let's get back on. Okay, let's fast. Let's forgive. Let's ask for forgiveness. Let's go to confession. Let's do, and you see it. It's got that quarterly attitude. It's got Lent. It's got the Apostles' Fast. It's got the Advent Fast, right? All of these things. They're there for us so that we can realize how to participate in confession, how to pray, and to recognize these attitudes so that I can, in some minuscule way, feel that I can approach that chalice. But the thing is, no one's worthy. No one is worthy to receive his body and blood. No one. Not even the saints anyone is worthy to receive his body and blood. But, there's a big but there. He allows it. Why? Because he loves us. Why? Because he forgives us. But only when we come to him and in front of him with a penitent and contrite heart. That's the key. That's the key to the understanding of the Eucharist. And then I tell to, I think it's both, as well as I give in many of my discussions with anyone I speak with, not in confession, but about how to receive the Eucharist. It has to be both avenues. You have to attempt. You have to make an effort. The effort of preparedness, whatever, how, to the length it might be. I had someone who recently had never fasted in their life. I said, okay, let's just try Friday. Just fast Friday, start doing a little bit more prayer, and let's go from there. And let's take one step. Great. You were able to take communion this Sunday. Good. Excellent. Beautiful. How do you feel? Wonderful. Okay. Now let's try a little bit more. Now you go to Wednesday and Friday, right? Okay. And then just get that. It's the baby steps. It's a figurative bicycle. Taking it a go, going one by one. But that's the key for us to realize, because then once you do that, what happens? You do this with your own lives. You do this with your own work. When you're having an engagement, a baptism, a wedding, any activity, do you not prepare to the nth degree to make sure it is perfect? So why don't I do that for my soul? Why don't I do that when I'm in front of God? That's when I go back to that early question: is what's the purpose of liturgy and not receiving the Eucharist? That's where it's tough. Where everything you said is correct, but it's not to the level of receiving his body and blood physically, especially us being such physical beings. Some people can be satisfied by hearing the word. Other people can say, I could hear the word or read the word by just looking on daily reads. Or now we even have live streams, right? But at the same point, even though the live stream's offered, it's not a tool to salvation. I hope people realize that. It's just kind of there. The hope is that you recognize what's going on, and then if you can't make it, that it's something that can at least get you by, and then you can contact the church so that you can invite the priest to come and give you the sacraments. The key into this whole aspect is a sacramental life. We forget that. We've talked about confession. We're not talking about the Eucharist, but the sacramental life is I'm supposed to participate in actively. Not all of them, right? You don't have to participate in all of them, but it's there to be given and it's there to be taken often in the respects when I prepare and I participate in it. What is that? We already know. Baptism is one and done. Chrismation is one and done. And actually, if you fall from the faith or whatever, it's a different story. Then it's the Eucharist, right? But you notice those three are offered at the same time, or it's offered one after the other, right? At the moment of baptism, especially with an infant. Adults, I've seen it where they'll be baptized, chrismated, but they'll receive communion depending on the situation, maybe at the next liturgy. Because if they get baptized hypothetically on a Saturday, they'll say, well, hold off, you don't have to receive it right away, and we'll do the next day. Not often, but under rare occurrences. Other places, I've seen the baptism done with the chrismation in the midst of the liturgy. Okay, where then from there, just like everyone else, they then have now been prepared to also receive the precious body and blood. Same thing with weddings. All of these sacraments were actually meant to be part of the Eucharistic celebration. We have taken them out for practicality, for economia, to help each other, to be understanding that not all this can be done at once. I mean, if you have a church that has 3 weddings, you can't do them all at once. I mean, you have all this activity going on, plus of everything else. Then that's how they broke it up into offering a akulutia, a service, a sacrament of the wedding, or anything else that come from there. So that kind of gives us the breakdown. And so now that we understand the Eucharist and we can build upon it, do you want to say something, Leah?
That it would be okay to have communion served at a wedding.
No, the wedding was done in the liturgy.
Because I'm just wondering, Catholics,
The
have like a
Catholics,
funeral
yeah.
mass where they actually.
So they're not wrong, right? But I don't know the rubrics to define it. Is it defined as a mass and a wedding placed in it? Or is it a wedding with a wedding mass, like they convert into it? I don't know. I've witnessed one, but I don't know exactly. While what it's been done is they would perform the wedding in the midst of the liturgy, and then they would also partake in the Holy Communion as well too as a couple towards the end. And the wedding happens like before. I think it's got to be some point around the word. I forgot at what aspect, but like the baptism. That's why you'll see like when they would whenever you have divine services, where instead of the Ayos of Theos, the Trisagion hymn, the hymn of all those who have been baptized in Christ has been placed in. Those would be the dates when they would have mass baptisms. That's usually Holy Saturday morning, and Christmas. No. Epiphany. Pentecost. I think those 3. Maybe Christmas. I gotta look at Christmas's rubrics, but
Ordination is always with the liturgy.
ordination always has to be in the liturgy, correct? But you see, in other words, so they were always supposed to be tied together. So like we said with those things, but the problem is except for ordination, we took those out, such as baptism, chrismation, and wedding, out of practicality, and to simplify it as well too. Whether they conformed it into a much simpler service, because why? Baptisms and weddings, what did they begin with? Don't remember? What did they begin with? What does the priest say? Don't think of the narthex for the baptism, and don't think of the aravona for the wedding. What did the priest begin with? The actual, because remember, I say this in my sacraments, what I start, but it's really the checkpoint of the service. They start with just like the liturgy. So it shows how they were actually all tied in at once in the midst of liturgy, but then out of the enhancement of the liturgical life and of the people, they were taken out to kind of be practical enough to offer so that multiple services and activities could be offered into that situation. So
But you can marry, let's say 40 couples at the same time.
40? I don't think so.
Ioannis Metaxas married to Kubaro, 40 bride and groom.
It's good to be dictator.
He's right there. He's right there. But I've seen two couples
I
get
saw the
married.
picture.
I've seen two couples get married.
Yeah, two I saw.
But
This is a big picture.
You've seen three at a time?
Yep.
Wow.
So far, it's not far away.
separated though.
Yeah.
They were separated, but all in the same.
Service.
Same
Yeah.
service.
It's like a baptism where you could, I've done baptisms of cousins. The same baptism, but it's like you restart, not restart. Let me give you a hypothetical. Baptism. I baptize one child, you do the oil, the baptism and chrismation of that first child, stop. Back to the beginning of the oil part for the next child. Oil, baptism, chrismation of that child, and then finish, and then commence everything back again.
So let me ask you, if there are twins, would they commonly? be
Same
baptized
thing.
together?
Well, together, it's the same style, because it's an individual child. You're gonna say the one who's born first gets precedent by a minute, who cares? But yeah, that's what usually would happen, so.
Years ago, they would make the, if it was a twin, they would make the one twin wait outside until the other one was baptized.
Well,
Well, years ago, the mother was
Yeah.
allowed to go. to
or the
church.
mom would be stuck outside.
They used to run to tell the name.
Yeah,
Have you seen a double wedding?
no, oh, I haven't participated in it.
Yeah, I saw one. But in a wedding, you have to take communion.
It's not communion, it's wine.
It's wine.
Big difference. That's why we're now allowed to do all these mixed marriages. If this was a general, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they took it out.
Plenty of wine.
Yeah, it's just wine. It's blessed wine. It's called the common cup. But I think for the couple in the liturgy, they would have to both partake in the Eucharist. I don't think they offer the common cup in a wedding
Years ago.
in the liturgy.
Years ago, when there was the common religion,
Yeah.
you would offer Eucharist.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to have a
I
common
think
cup.
like in Greece, it would be different.
Glass of wine.
Well, because they already have a common cup, the common cup, you even hear the prayer just offered as a blessing. It's almost like a superficial, and everyone always thinks it's the Eucharist, and I say, no. Yeah, that's the big key point, because that's why we allow for mixed marriages to happen. Because the other participant can't receive the Eucharist because they're not Orthodox. Black and white, right? So how do you then offer the marriage if it's in the Eucharist? Well, you couldn't.
Yeah,
So I
but
think that's how they also created to offer it separately, to then give in that manner.
how about if he's baptized and he becomes an Orthodox? And
In
then-
it, yeah, but that again, we don't, the common practice, no one does weddings in the liturgy anymore. I've only seen one activity of that in recent memory. It's very rare. You almost have to like coordinate with the priest and see if the priest is even willing to do that. Most Greek priests, even Greek priests don't do that. I don't know the other denominations, but most don't do it. They'll say, let's just do it a separate service. I think because of functionality, it could be so foreign that if people are there for a regular Sunday service and they're seeing a wedding. Think of modern day. Just think of modern day. If you try to put a regular wedding in the midst of a Sunday liturgy, it would probably be the most conflicting thing to organize, first as a priest and even like a parish. Because then you're gonna have like, well, so we're celebrating, but I gotta pray for the Eucharist. Go do this. Where do they stand? Do you move them? Where does it go? It doesn't seem very functional.
Well, it's sort of like an ordination, because, it's like liturgy plus an ordination.
Well, it says, they have the three same hymns, right? The Isaiah, whatever. Those three hymns, they chant at the ordination as well too. But the ordination, it's for the liturgical purpose of the ordinance, right? The person who's gonna be ordained. So they then become a part of the service. While a wedding, it's like you inserted it into the service. I mean, a little bit different. Because then in turn, the only change that the ordination offers is that you're bringing someone into the office of the priesthood, whether it's the diaconate, the priest, or a bishop, right? And they're separated. The bishop's ordained after the word. The deacon is, the priest is ordained after the great entrance, and the deacon is ordained after the kneeling of the
After the announcement.
yeah, bravo, yeah, after the anapora, after the consecration, so,
I've only done ordinations.
yeah.
Seems like the wedding But they inserted into it seems like the main focus was the actual liturgy, not the wedding. You know, where it's
Or-
nowadays they have two.
Or the unifying aspect of the importance of the Eucharist. And all of it, because let's say with baptism, all that stuff, like it's there. But we've turned it to such a formality or irrelevance, we don't participate in it. That's why I've seen a few adults be baptized on Holy Saturday morning during that time, which was really cool. So what happens is right before the Osis Christon, they would then go out and begin doing the prayers after they've done the small entrance. And then when they get into the Osis Christon, then they would go around the font, right? With the faithful, and then they would continue the rest of the service in that manner. And then they would receive communion at the point of the Eucharist offered to the faithful. So pretty unique when you think about it that way. So we said that, so we talked about that in the Eucharist. You know, my challenge, my hope is that that we realize you know, how do we break away from an attitude of self-condemnation as well as an attitude of separating ourselves from God. I mean, the unanswer, if everyone believes, is we all want to be one with God. That's we hope. But how do you actively engage in that? Or then how do you actively encourage people to do that? Because the problem is with communing often, people there could be attitudes of judgment, which is very tough. I've had people ask me why, when we give communion, we move our camera up. And we say, I told people, I said, it's not necessary to see who's taking communion. Not actually, if you were there, you could see it, but it's not even important to you. When someone's communion, it's a very difficult time in the liturgy. Especially when you have like the multitudes that we have, like in our church, who receive, and so it can take us like about 15 minutes. That's why the chanter or the choir sings during that time, is to kind of keep us in the loop that we're supposed to still be in a prayerful state. But the problem is, you know, then you're there and you're trying to dictate where to go. I mean, we have somewhat of order. In Greece and other countries, I mean, it's a free-for-all. They all bolt down the middle and
They
pushing
push
each
you.
other and everything else.
They
So,
push you.
scrum, you know what I mean?
They-
So, and that's a problem, because then you're like, and then that's when they get into that, because when you're standing there or you're sitting there, then you're seeing, oh, who's going up and what they're doing and what they're receiving. And easily into the mind of a human could be what? They're not right, they don't deserve it. Who are they? They go every Sunday. I've had people come over, like, you know, I've seen people go up every Sunday. I said, okay, so
With COVID, I think things changed. People wanted to see how many people had mass or not. They didn't care who took communion, but if they were wearing the mask.
I don't know if it
And they
could be,
won't
but
have-
I don't think so to that degree, but like you still got that. I mean, but that's any church, right? Because we've had that with other situations in the Orthodox Church. Holy Friday, you know, they make fun of it and say like, you know, it's a Greek runway. It's a Greek fashion show, because everyone has to wear their nicest clothes on Holy Friday or Holy Saturday night. So people could see, because that's, you know, that's the most time that people come out. They're like, oh, look what they're wearing, or look who's here, or what, how much burnt hair are you gonna smell this, you know, this night or whatever, and stuff like that. All that, we see, that's the problem, all these things, even though it's comical, are irrelevant.
You don't need it.
Not only you don't need them, but it doesn't, the problem is, we put that, and even though it's put into like society, like so much comical, the sad part is that's a reality that people don't totally care about. And so, it goes back to my beginning point. So why do we deny ourselves the Eucharist? Or and that's and not even adults, not even like older adults. There's also an attitude that once kids are out of high school or even high school, they don't start taking regular. I'm like, okay, listen, I know we're all sinners, and I know they're maturing or whatever as well too, but why? Because if you're starting younger to deny yourself, it's gonna be that much harder when you get older to want to partake. And because you've also trained your mind to make it forward. And then I have adults, you know, one of my predecessors here was an assistant priest, Father Vladimir, who passed away. I remember a couple stories from Peter and Paul. We used to help with Father Angel Artemis. He actually, a child came up and his mother was there, and the child took when the mother did it, and he actually slapped the mom across the face because she wouldn't take communion. And he's like, you need to take communion to be with your child. Oh, I remember hearing that story, and I was like, whoa. But not later on, he didn't. That was the one story that I heard. But the other time later on, he then told numerous people, whenever they bring a child up or they shove them to our face, they wouldn't take communion. And you're like, so what's the goal of them receiving it and you're not? And with all due respect, even though I understand you could say the audacity, there is a point to that. Because it's like, so what's the goal here? Are you trying to save them? You're not saving yourself. And you're not training them because you're not imitating. And it's very tough, especially with priests, when you have the hardest age group is usually between like 2 and 4, because they're very, the Greek term zoidy, they move their arms or whatever. And if they're not trained, but then, a lot of people, they'll see my child, okay, my baby or whatever. And I've seen other ones who go often and they recognize it. So it doesn't matter. It's about that participation. It's about that understanding. And it's also about us teaching and encouraging. My goal as a priest is not to discourage people from the Eucharist. My goal is to bring people closer to Christ and to the Eucharist. But we have to do a lot of self-reflecting. It's got to be inward. I got to look and say, I know I'm unworthy. How can I try to make myself somewhat worthy? I know this realistically, the participation of the Eucharist is a battle of you believing in God or not. Very simple. That's my opinion. People want to debate me, argue, whatever, it's fine. But if you're a Christian and you believe, then you should try to participate. Okay. If you don't, then the harder question is, okay, so why are we there? Because then I've already said openly, I'm tired of trying to make decent sermons because I'm not that good. So I need the Eucharist at that point, or I'm in big trouble. I don't know why everyone's coming to church. And that's just for now. I mean, but you see that though. Why? Our churches are hemorrhaging. Okay. So they're not coming. And they don't see the importance of the Eucharist, because if they did, and we know that every Sunday Christ is here, wouldn't the whole place be filled? It's the same thing when a miraculous icon comes to a church. Oh, the icon of Panagia Iviro from Hawaii. Floods, multitudes of people. It's gone. Back to the church being empty. Oh, we hear that there's relics of the saints here. Oh, let's go. And then once it's done, bye. Christ is there all the time. His body and blood. Let's go. Let's receive. You hear that even in the sermons, Chrysostom, for Pascha, all these things. Come, it's all jubilant. Even those in the 11th hour we're having fast. Come, join us. Celebrate our Lord's glorious resurrection. Why don't we? What separates me? Or what has clouded me to separate me from God? And there are. It goes back to what Nico said before. Yes, it is what appropriately the devil has done to putting the shame on forgiveness and then in turn on guilt. And I can't tell you, I have people who tell me all the time, and they break it down, I mean, systematically, where they're like, I'm a smoker, I can't give up smoking. Okay. I tell them, like, just don't smoke Sunday morning. Try and come and then just receive communion without smoking. You know what I mean? Start somewhere. I know it's tough, but it's tough for everyone. There's no one who comes up who should feel like, oh, this is a cakewalk. Don't worry about it. Even Lentz, even because why? They're not. That's the hard part. Every one of us has hurdles. Every one of us struggles. Every one of us picks up our cross, and we're called to follow him. Just like he said to Matthew today. Matthew, I think, if I'm correct, out of all the apostles, he had the least amount of words told to him, so that became an apostle. All Christ said to them, 2 words, was follow me. To the other ones, if you look at the 12, there was a little bit more conversation. Even with Philip and Nathaniel, they all said, what good could come out of Nazareth? Come and see, right? But then he even talked to him. He's like, I saw you under the tree. He had more conversation. Matthew, a great tax collector, right? A talono, as they told him. All he saw, he knew him in his heart, simply said, follow me. And he dropped everything to follow. Peter, he had more conversation with. All the other ones as well, too. The sons of Zebedee, right? All these things. But Matthew, on the 2 words, he went and followed him. Why is it so hard for us to follow him? And now they follow him, be with him. And that's what we really have to think about, because if we see the Eucharist as it is satisfying, as it is edifying, and it is the peak, the climax of our Christian life and the sacramental life, then we have to make a charge to ourselves. Being that we're now in Advent, right? And we're trying to fast, we're trying to regroup, trying to do the best that we can. Naturally, everyone talks about, like with Thanksgiving and Christmas, about gifts and food and gluttonous and stuff like that. Try to make that effort so that we can grow with Christ. Try to make that effort so that we can receive Christ and be with Christ. Christmas without receiving his body and blood, actually, with all due respect, again, is irrelevant. How can you give glory to God and receive him into the nave when I'm not even creating a nave for him and myself? That's a big problem. Pascha is the same situation. What a coincidence. Most people do take the most communion on Christmas and Easter. But we should be trying to do this often. That's the best one. My favorite one, the one I always pick on, I highlight, I'll wrap up there if anyone has any questions. But it's the Epiphany. I have a quarter of the community take communion at Epiphany, and everyone bum rushes me for the water. I will repeat very easily. What's more important? His body and blood or blessed water? Tell me.
Well, Epiphany.
No, there's no well. I asked you a simple question.
No, I'm
I asked you a
talking
simple
about
question.
communion.
Stop. Holy Communion or holy water? What's more important?
Holy communion.
So then why doesn't everyone take Holy Communion?
Epiphany, I thought they did.
No.
That's why we have 40 days before Christmas for the ones that they were preparing to be baptized and take communion, Epiphany.
No, we're fasting for the preparation of Christ's birth. For nativity of Christ. From now, November
But
15th.
they were not Christians.
They didn't practice for 40 days. Their catechism was longer. Catechism to become a catechumen, someone preparing to become an Orthodox Christian. It'd be years. It would take a long time. It was a time of preparation. And Fadasu then they would also dismiss you at the prayers of the catechumens before the great entrance. You are not allowed to be in the church at that time.
Right. Right.
The doors, no, before that, at the catechumen prayers, it's the same prayers I say the pre-sanctified. All the catechumens depart, let all the catechumens depart. The doors are a little bit after, but it has a relation to it. But think about that. So, no, but an Epiphany, common now, modern day, people come for the Ayesmo and they don't take communion. So they'll tell me, I fast for the Ayesmo. And what does it do for you?
Do they have to fast for a year? Well, I don't fast anyway.
Well, the eve of the Epiphany are called the fast in preparation of the great feast the next day, okay? But it's, again, do you hear the word prepare? You're celebrating this great feast, right? So you're gonna try to put some sort of preparedness. We prepare for Thanksgiving from weeks for this huge spread. I can't prepare an hour of holding back from food. I can't prepare by offering an hour of prayer. I can't prepare by offering almsgiving, by giving thanks and helping people for Christ and receive his body and blood. So where's our priorities? We know the reality. It's all of us. We all struggle. No one's innocent. I am too. I get it. But the problem is, like, when you get those attitudes, especially about Epiphany, it's very disturbing. I really think it's disturbing because every person, if they're there to receive Ayesmo and they have fasted, you must come receive Holy Communion. If not, then don't drink the water. Wait till another day to receive it. But that's not appropriate. It's a hallucinogenic oddity. It makes no sense. It's like you have Christ, but he blesses this and he's right there. But I'm like, I don't need you. Thank you. I'm gonna go right here. Because this will save me. This will give me magic powers. It'll do something. But yeah, it's holy water. It's not a sacrament. That's a big problem. Big problem. And us Christians, especially Greek, it's a very ethnic issue. We don't break that barrier. But again, it goes back to what Santi said and all of us. We were taught, you have to fast and prepare. So I'm like, okay. And then I have people who fast the 40 days of Lent and don't take communion. Holy cow. I'm like, you're that bad of a sinner? Where you actually do try to prepare and you can't even take it done? If you're fasting, Padasso, think of this one. If you're fasting the 40 days, those weeks leading up to the 40, that Sunday when it's offered, why don't you take communion? Now, if an excuse comes that I ate in the morning, okay. Next Sunday, don't. Okay. But you say, well, I have to. That's a different. The have to is a different that's a different category. But if you're just not making the focus and you're fasting, that fast, I will repeat, is irrelevant. Just because here's the best part. Chrysostom said it, everyone says it. To the one who fasted from the first moment, to the person who fasted only the hour before, come into the banquet, come join. Okay. So I'm not implying that, okay, great, Father Chris gave me the out, I'll just fast for an hour on Anastas. No. But make an effort and then go receive. Because that nourishment every Sunday, do you realize Monday through Friday during Lent, you can offer a pre-sanctified liturgy, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Because people want to receive the edification and sanctification of Christ's body and blood. You could, we don't offer it. We offer it Wednesday nights. Oh, it's something you need. But why? Because Father Chris is gonna have a meal and someone will speak to them. That's irrelevant. That's important. Fridays, we used to offer Fridays. They usually offer it in the morning. Because at night, we do the Catechism meet. We'd offer Friday morning. Then we used to do it in St. Louis, Chicago. Sadly, I'd only had like 2 or 3 people come. God bless them. They took communion. It was really heartwarming because they made that effort, but it's not important. It's when I say it's not important, it's both conditioned. It's not done often, or they never grew up that way. And it's not a necessity. It's the same thing that when I challenge people to, and I have to blame too on this one too. When you go on vacation, there's a Sunday during that week of vacation.
Yeah.
Can't you go to church? And if you
Of
go to
course.
church, you
My
go to
kids
church.
Go to church.
I didn't say anything about your kids. But when you go to
That's how
church,
we
when you
met
go,
your friend in Michigan.
oh yeah, you told me about that.
They
Um,
never miss communion.
That's key. That's important. You're supposed, even like you go to Greece, I have people that go to Greece, they don't go to Sunday. Or they're like, I went to this church and this one. I'm like, oh great. Did you go Sunday? Like, no. I'm like, oh, interesting. Like just like a typical Greek. You have them right next to you, and you won't even go next, you won't even go in them. It's a problem. These are big problems. These are root human issues. It's not society.
Priority should be the church.
No, priority should be your sacramental life
Yeah,
and your
but if you
participation
have
with Christ.
kids, you don't schedule to have games on Sunday. 10 o'clock in the morning.
Listen. Our world, our society, our humanity is ever evolving, ever changing. You know where the church is, how the church is. My fear though is we all take the church for granted. And the problem is, as we're witnessing this, seeing the systematic emptying of the churches without general engagement, general participation, general spirituality. I mean, I got people who come to church and they don't know why they're there. I got people who come to, again, we've had the issue. If you don't participate in the Eucharist, you have to ask a deeper question, why am I here? What's the purpose of this? Okay, you want to hear the word, you want to hear a sermon, but that can last for so long. With all due respect, look at my Protestant brothers. Why do you think they always change? Why do you always think like, Joel Osteen was good for 5 years? Before that, you had Billy Graham's, you have glass churches, you have everything. You name it, whatever the fad is. Let's call the next one, okay?
Stanley.
All of them. They're all fads. They didn't last. The Church of Christ, the Orthodox Church, from inception, it was always there. The problem though is we're not recognizing the importance of it and the necessity to be a part of it. And then why? Because we don't recognize. And it is. And when you talk to people, like we were talking about this today, we had a clergy synodalist meeting today, and they said that out of the thousands of people that they did a survey from like a Pew report and everything else, but it was Orthodox Christian based. And they say only about 22% of active Orthodox Christians were participating on a regular basis, regular attendance to their church. That's 22%, okay? That's so poor, all right? Then that 22%, I don't know if they even asked that level, but how many actually commune? Do they go and take communion often? Do they participate? Is it a priority? Is it the focus of their participation? And that's where we then get into these deep struggles, because if you only see 22% out of a data pile, right? That's not every Orthodox Christian, they couldn't get everyone. But to that, and you're only getting 22% of just that grouping, we got some serious issues there, because that's not sustainable. That's not growing. We know it's declining. But because that's what I tell people. When people tell me, Father, what does the church need? I say, we just need you. Just be here. Come pray. I don't need money. Money doesn't do me anything. What do you want to do? If I build a basilica more and it's empty, what do I gain? We're the body of Christ. We're what he shed his blood for, what he sacrificed his body for. And that's the thing. But if we're not a part of it, that's when I hit it before, especially with the live stream. The live stream is just, it's like as I said, it's just there. It's just a viewing. But if you're not physically, if you don't participate in the sacrament, or if you can't, and you don't reach out so that we can come and give it to you, again, it's just there. Again, it's like how we saw with these other things. You're not gaining salvation from watching a service. You might gain peace for a little bit. You might find an opportunity to pray. You might hear the word and stuff like that, but it can't be your norm. Christians are called to work in whatever manner. I mean, Christianity has no bounds. Christianity has no stereotypes. You know, if someone's special needs, someone's paralyzed or whatever, they're still Christian. They can work in their own manner, whether they're present in the physical church or whatever, they can still offer. When I say work, it's a quotation work. I'm not asking you to talk about work. A work is us being together as a body of Christ in the church. And in that participation, going to work towards receiving the Eucharist. But these are bigger issues, and these are things that we don't think about receiving often, because when I offer all these multiple liturgies, you know, I noticed that during COVID was, I knew the eye opener, it wasn't anything changing. But remember, COVID, we were closed from March till end of May, like physically closed. And then we opened up, and then your clergy, at least we were able to, if the church was able to, offered multiple liturgies. That meant, because remember, you only have like 100, 150 people in one. And everyone's like, oh, what a breath, what a fresh air, we could be back in or whatever. How temporal, how transient that was. Yeah, the first few Sundays, but even then, they would want to come for the first liturgy, that would fill up, and the second one, they would fill up, but there was not 100 people. And then you saw it dissipate after about a few months, and then we would open to more people. But you would think, when you were denied Christ physically, you know, in the Eucharist and the church, you had to watch Holy Week via a live stream. Okay, the zeal of your fire to build a relationship with Christ, I would think, would be more inflamed, so that I could grow that. But sadly, we get back into the routine of things. Where now, what has come of this is a catch up for the families and people of their daily and busy activities. I'm telling you, I think families, I didn't think it was possible, but families now are more busy than pre-COVID. Hear what I just said? I mean, it's nonstop when I'm talking to these kids and parents. I'm like, how do you guys breathe? I struggle with my wife and my kids. Okay, I know with the church or
We
whatever.
have three.
But you have families. As you have families, and I joke around about, like I said, I talked to a sixth grader who is able to give me his calendar from September to December and to tell me how he could not come to church because he had everything going on every single one of those days. Wow.
Including Sunday.
Actually, it was more Sunday. Remember, that's another problem too. The problem on us as well too is we're only Sunday goers. I just brought up the beginning. You know, I apologize to our friends that are online. Today was St. Matthew. I only had a couple people in church. He's not a St. Demetrius. He's not a popular big saint of modern day. So when I offer the Eucharist, whatever, you know, I'm offering it for the faithful, whoever wants to come and receive. But you know what is a liturgy, you know, it's going to be there. So if you need it or you desire it, if you're able to go participate, I get it. We work, people do their stuff. Remember, I know churches, but it's really getting out of tradition now. But the churches, especially during Holy Week, they would offer an early Holy Thursday morning liturgy, like 5 a.m. So before you go to work, you can receive Holy Communion. Holy Saturday morning,
Yeah.
Early liturgy, like 6 a.m. And I'll be in the beginning, I used to say, like, wow, that was pretty fun, the crowds, but that was slowly dissipating.
I know a friend of mine who's Catholic, and he goes to church every morning before he goes to work.
Wow.
I used to go
You know,
to the
and
Catholic.
I grew up in the Catholic neighborhood. They had a bus stop in front of the church so people could sit there, go to church.
I'm gonna
get
tell you
off the bus
something.
And go to work.
And it is kudos to the Catholic Church in that manner. They are, but you gotta understand, this is where the Catholic Church has their supremacy, is because of the resources.
Yes.
They have the resources of multiple clergy,
Yes.
to give to the needs, like, that's a great one, the bus stop, or to have a bus to pick them up, take them, offer multiple masses, all those activities. Us, gosh, you know, you do one liturgy and maybe you do an evening service and you're already white, because then I still got to serve another capacity to the faithful and different things, youth ministry, stuff like that. Like, it's not feasible. And that's where else our downfall is, because we're not also training people to see the calling of service. I mean, look at it, our churches are dying. We're also losing priests. I mean, it's a dual death of your church. You will not have enough priests to serve you. Therefore, you will then not be able to participate. And then before you know it, any of those small to medium churches will dwindle. And they're going to have to create to large churches. And whatever you get out of it, you get. And if anything, you'll probably inevitably see the reality that I'm not receiving what I want. And just float on. And just either see something else, watch a Joel Osteen, feel good for 30 minutes, and then back to the grind of everything else.
Here's one thing I noticed, in COVID, there was a friend of mine who used to show up at the beginning of Orthos every Sunday.
Mm.
He would take communion every Sunday.
Mm.
With COVID, he just streams now. He never comes to church. I mean, that is just.
Really? Do you talk?
Strange, he shows up to church once every 2 or 3 months, and,
Really?
Yeah.
Fear,
Is he,
Can you
yeah,
see it?
older?
Yeah, he's
Those?
older, he's,
fear, fear.
Listen, I respectfully, I give a pass to any elderly that are watching it. I get it. The positive that I see for like the live stream compared to the physical participation, solely, this is the only thing I see of positive. I'm very honest. It's just promotion. It shows that your church is active or doing stuff. Because I live stream all my liturgies, all my paracleses, on request, weddings, baptisms, and funerals. Because people, I know it's comical. We laugh about it because we made it to satire, but we all like say like, oh, the priest only work, 2 or 3 hours on Sunday. But it's okay, but I'm like, here you go. Because I'll never forget, I was having people during COVID and post-COVID, like, oh my gosh, you guys are so much service. I'm like, no, that's just normally what we do. I don't know why you'd think differently. And that a lot of things for me in my immaturity as a young priest is, and I've said it openly, the worst word that I think taking out from the dormition attitude, because there's not an assumption. Assuming you think you know or you think this about a person. The only thing I can realize I should be like, God, who was it? Is it Socrates, whatever? It's like the only thing I know is I know nothing. Plato.
Socrates.
Yeah, it's the truth. I know nothing because people amaze me. I said it in St. Louis, Chicago. St. Louis, Chicago, and we'll finish here because we talked enough. St. Louis, Chicago is a very large parish. It's older, but it's a machine because even though they only have now like 500 stewards written, you still have a neighborhood of like elderly or whatever that still exists that just come in and out, random, whatever. It was nonstop, and I could never understand like, what is this? And the one thing that was like every day, you could go in and say, like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do today. This is my prediction. Blah blah blah. This is how it's going to work out. I remember telling my brother Samuel, then Father Apostle, like, you know what? I said 2 quotes, and I'll never forget. He couldn't stop laughing. I says, "This place will never cease to amaze me." That was one, and the other one was he said something like something just outrageous happened. It was, I mean, crazy, something silly, nothing, just wild, just circumstantial. I said, "Oh gosh, hold on." It's really funny. I thought it was funny. Yeah, I think I'm funny. I think Presbitera's not on. She's laughing at me. Because she doesn't think I'm funny. She makes fun of me. That's it. Here. I said, after what happened, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written about Saint Demetrius. Amen. Because of all the craziness that we would deal and go through. Because when you see that, I kind of put in that context because it's just surreal what you see and what you go through. But the reality is, which I've come to, that's why I brought up, I'm going to do this actually continuously, monthly. As you heard me, I kind of offer a little teaching liturgy, breaking a few parts of the liturgy down. We don't know. We simply don't know what we're here for. Very simple. And when we talk about church, when we say, I'm a part of St. Nectario's church, we don't realize that I'm a part of a community. When they say church, they constitute that brick building over there. And that's something for, because we don't realize that church is spirituality, it's worship, it's fellowship, it's philanthropy, it's philoxenia, it's philotimo, and it's all of these essences that are describing us and God. But we don't. And that's why I brought up at the beginning of my conversation today, or tonight, about the Eucharist. My God, I mean, like I said, if you really just allow it to simmer in your brain, that I have Christ here at every liturgy, and he has offered for me, for my forgiveness of my sins and for eternal life, why am I not trying to receive him as often as possible? I would go insane. We're going to be like, okay, we all love challenges. When we're trying to lose weight, well, all right, I'll do it. I got a marker to reach. I'm going to do it as much as I can. For wealth and for work in progress, I'm gonna do the best I can so I can make more money and be better off. When I tell people that Christianity and our faith does not have a checklist, that's true. But you would think that if I had Christ in the Eucharist, I would want to try to check that off as often as possible. And doing it by praying, by worshiping, by fasting, by almsgiving, the whole 9 yards, and just trying. And so when you live like Christ, you will then be with Christ, and you can receive Christ. We don't do it. We don't do it. Now, I'm preaching to a somewhat of a choir, as I do see multiple of you who do. So God bless you. To others that don't, try. But do whatever you can to get yourself into that routine. It might not be easy. I know we're conditioned. I know whatever. And I apologize. I'm not condemning or chopping down what our elders have taught. You gotta remember, what they were taught, especially great grandparents, post-wars, both of Greek independence and then even to the Great World Wars, it was not plentiful. There was one clergyman who would come once or twice a month if you were lucky. So in other words, you would only have that infrequent opportunity to receive Holy Communion. And then they would then challenge you. I know people who I have other ones who say you're supposed to fast the entire week of leading up to that communion. Well, if that's the case, then because if we're outside of a Lenten period, you're gonna be like, oh, I'd rather have this cheeseburger Monday, I won't take communion this Sunday. And then you're gonna make that as a excuse, so then the following week you'll do the same, and then in turn, you'll just keep the opportunities to not receive communion, if that's how you fast. Then that's when I get frustrated with the Lenten time, because Lenten, you're already doing that. So receive. If you've gone to confession, or if you talk to your priest, if that's what he's giving you, but get that guidance. I think that's the struggle. I think we don't have guidance. And I don't know if people are afraid to ask the priest for guidance. It might have been foreign to ask for guidance in the past, but I think that's something we have to really start kind of cultivating so we can make this purposeful. Because like I said, I'm not here to receive communion for myself. I can't do individual liturgies. A liturgy, you have to be done at minimum with 2 or 3 people. It cannot be done on a one-on-one basis, or even technically with just a chanter. You need to have multiple people be there. And respectfully, I've even heard in some canon as well too, that there should be at least someone else other than the priest also receiving Holy Communion as well too. So that's a big thing, because like if you have a weekday liturgy, no one receives, okay, but it happens. I've seen it before. I've done a liturgy, it was just me and the chanter, who then also played sexton. That was like a blizzard, I'll never forget that. It was just me and him. And you go out, do blessing. Yes, I know, I believe. I think the angels are there. I know the saints are. They're celebrating with us with so beautiful liturgy. And as a priest, you're given that by St. John Chrysostom. You serve like it's your first and it's your last liturgy. And you serve it the best way that you can. Okay, that's very powerful, because your first liturgy, you're always going to have like butterflies, right? Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Whatever. And you do that even to your last liturgy. Not that you have butterflies, but it's the awe, it's the fear of God, phobos theou, that's awe-inspiring, that I'm in the presence of this in the first place. And that he allows me first. I'm the first of the unworthy, not you guys. I am. But he allows me to be a vessel to allow for the leading of this concelebration of the Eucharist, so that you, the faithful, with myself, can receive his precious body and blood. And that's something I think we need to really dwell upon. So as we then go about our days and we go about our weeks, we make it a challenge. We make it an effort to participate in the Eucharist as often as possible with the guidance of your priest. And then from there to also participate as well in a stronger spiritual and sacramental life. And then that will give us that real edification to real purpose in our church and to our faith as well too. But it's got to start there, and then we can really build upon everything else that we've talked about, understanding, teaching, and building all those things before. So,
Father, you're the first priest I ever met who has so many liturgies during the week. And I'm trying. It's hard for me in the morning before 10 to be here. I really enjoy them.
I'd like
Do
to
you
thank
decide
for
that,
this,
or
Prophet Elijah.
Father, why, let me ask you
you
this
have a
question.
lot of liturgies,
I don't,
more than other churches?
it's all circumstantial. I don't like, St. John's offers a lot, Ascension offers a lot. It depends. I am very blessed I can't do a liturgy. I can't do a liturgy without a chanter. So we have incredible chanters who can either do Greek and English, which is excellent. I have a sexton, I have a neokota like Mr. Elias, who's a great asset. All these things, like I can't do these. So if they're not there, I can't do them. And then we also have clergy that help out. Father Chris Kerhulis, Deacon Zacharia, all these things. This is what allows it to be done. If not, I would be like other priests and stuff doing. Sadly, I'd be disappointed. For me, I've told this to my wife, and it's one thing that peeves me. My wife doesn't say, but other ones. When they think that I do a lot of liturgy, they think that's got to be very tiring. I tell people the liturgy is probably my greatest joy. There's no work to it because I'm participating just like you guys are. So when I was like, oh, you gotta be exhausted. Sundays are a different ballgame. Sundays, they have their own headaches. Sundays have their own pressures, sermons and all that stuff. My weekday ones, okay, I'll read from a saint or whatever it is and give to the purpose or whatever, but it's all enjoyable. I look forward to every Sunday. Everything, yes, I'm just like every other human. Well, sometimes I'll wake up, it'll be tough to wake up. Okay, but you go. Now, yes, it's my duty, it's my dedication.
But you're the first one who has so many.
No, I mean, maybe here at St. Ignatius, but St.
Over
Ignatius,
here.
we're only what, 50 years old. Father Peter, I know, I also understood too, but Father Peter also had, I was here as his lay assistant. He didn't have multiple chanters, he had Fred Fotis, but he was getting older too, the poor guy of the blessed memory. Before that, Father T, but it's also to the community. And I personally, and I tell this to I tell the president, I'm like, I'm actually shocked with respect the amount of people that come to the weekday liturgies. I wasn't expecting, like, you'll see like, I don't know, outside of today, you get like 10, 20, and you're like, wow. And so for me, that's very comforting or supportive to see more. And if there's only one person, okay, not everybody you met, but when you see more people, you see their want. That's where it gives me strength, that they're wanting it too. And there's this hymn that I always think about. It's a hymn during Lent, during pre-sanctified liturgies, where in Greek it says, "Yevsaste keidete oti alithos estin o Christos." Come and taste to see how good the Lord is. And that's something for me, I always think about in my ministry and everything else, because there's nothing greater. That's why I always look forward to them. They are all jubilant. Every liturgy is always got to be jubilant, even if it's during Holy Week, Holy Thursday morning. And you'd think it's tough. It's like it's almost like it's schizophrenic. You're about to crucify Christ, yet I'm doing his mystical supper, where it has a lot of solemnness to it. Yet, even in that point, it shows hope. It shows to the light of the resurrection. But we gotta be mindful. It's all mindful. That's why they're put in these places for us. And that's why even during Holy Week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, technically, in the morning, I offer here on Tuesday morning, Holy Tuesday morning, we offer a pre-sanctified liturgy. And that's just, again, for the faithful to receive, so they can be satisfied, and they too come and taste and see that the Lord is good. When we believe that and we understand that, we build our relationship stronger with God. So, anyone online, do you guys have anything else you want to add to it tonight? No?
Father, can I just ask real quick, is there any significance or symbolism with the blessed bread that's handed out after Holy Communion?
Ipsoma? Yeah, great question. So the ipsoma is that one that we usually put in a foil. I've seen it in paper. I've seen it in like parchment paper. There's some places that have some really cool ones that are actually like decorated, where it actually says like Jesus Christos on the outside. It's usually cut from the circle. We'll do a little screen share. All right, so when you this is reverse. Why aren't they all reverse? Is that funny? All right, you're not screen shared. Sorry. Is it? Real quick. So, okay. So when you get the seal and you put this into the bread, this part is the decorative part, which we take out of the prospero, okay? And we all know this is the amno, right? These are the 9 orders of the saints and angels. This is the representation of the Virgin Mary. This is actually an M in here, if you can kind of see. There's the M, mitir theu, okay? And then these are 2 more, if you are going to use them for pre-sanctifieds, or, you know, that's all you use them for is pre-sanctifieds. You wouldn't have multiple hosts. We take out this bottom piece, okay? Where then we would, that this whole square, like, and the entire prospero. This is just a general prospero. Okay. See? Okay. We take out this bottom piece right here, and I do the commemoration of the living, the dead. The living from this side, and the dead on this side when I scrape the crumbs. So when you get the ipsoma, and it's taken out of a piece from this entire inner circle. If it's like this one, you wouldn't get it from out here, only from the part of the seal. It's used to give ipsoma is like raising. It's like you take it out of this heightness, and that it's given to the faithful as a blessing, especially to those who would either able not to come and receive it physically, like they're ill or homebound, or many people I know, especially monastics, would take them and they would eat some of it daily to sustain them throughout the week as a blessing. And so in other words, they would eat it before they took their pills or holy water. I've seen people, what I would used to see, even my mom and Yiga would show me as well too, is you would take the prospero, right? You would take the ipsoma that you got, you would eat some in the morning when you did your prayers, okay? Then you would have holy water. Then you would then do your prayers and commence your day and go from there. But you only ate in the morning before you did any other activity as well too. So even technically Sundays, it's not just a feeding trough when we give it on Didero. It's blessed. It's instead of the gifts. Technically, I've heard people, you're also supposed to fast when you receive the Andidero. But naturally, if the people don't fast for the Eucharist, they probably didn't fast for the Andidero, so they take it as a blessing instead. That's why we can also give the gift, the Andidero, instead of the gift spread to anyone. It doesn't have to be Orthodox. It's just a blessing, right? It'd be given to Christians, non-Christians, whatever it might be, and go from there. But that's why it's offered, and that's where it comes from. And the ipsoma that comes from the seal of it. Now, naturally, the ipsoma comes from the first prospero that's offered at the proskomidi, the table of oblation of preparation. And then any other subsequent ones that you have for like a big feast, they would have the other breads that are offered, and they would take them out of those pieces, put them in foils as designated ipsoma, to then be blessed and then given to families or people individually. Usually they're also given to the people who actually made the offering, so you get something back. It's not necessary, but these are all modern day traditions. That's all. It's something necessary you have to do. So does that kind of help you, Greg?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah.
Same thing like Arto. Arto, like I've had churches, like they'll give one loaf to the family.
How many we had in Merida unit,
There was,
35?
yeah, there was six, no, six were offered. 6 families offered it. That was the most I've ever seen.
I thought there were
I only
25
had,
up
I had
there.
I had 3 families originally, and then 3 people brought them. I'm like, it's a lot of apple. But yeah, it was good. It's good to give to the people and to,
You know, the baskets at the bottom, we had more.
yeah, true. They were
Okay,
good too.
got a question here. Somebody told me this, I don't know how true it is, but the names for the dead people. I know we're supposed to do it for the Lord. They say that reading for the Lord is more powerful than reading for
Memorial.
the memorial.
I don't know. Either way, they're commemorated. I think that's the key, is that we're there to commemorate them. That's why I tell people that when you come on Sunday, you should offer living and the dead as often as possible. If you offer for like a month or whatever, like people like, so right now during the Advent season, some churches are doing what is called a Sarada Liturgo, which means 40-day liturgies. Every day they're doing a liturgy. During the Advent season, you can do that. If you have the priest, then you have the power to do it. And people will give the names and you keep the names the whole 40 days. So in every liturgy, They read all those names, okay, whatever it might be, living,
But
and the dead.
absolutely
Yeah,
yes.
and it's for the, and it's at the preparation, because remember, at the preparation of the patent, you're commemorating all the souls of the living and the dead, okay?
Oh.
But I don't think one has a precedent over the other. They're both commemorations. The problem with the memorials, though, is the memorial's designated for that person. There's an old tradition that people then also give me a list of names to be read at the memorial. I'm like, but it defeats the purpose. You do a memorial for the person who's passed. 40, 90, 3, 6, 9 months in a year, then a year or whatever you guys want to do. Then they get moved to Psycho-Sabato. The tradition was you go to Psycho-Sabato after many years. You could still do 5, 10, 20, whatever, it doesn't matter. But to give me an additional list, it's not to say it's not inappropriate, it's just, I'm gonna read it. But it's not for that. The memorial is for the individual who passed.
A lot of times families do multiple.
No.
rituals.
Right,
And the
that's,
family
yeah,
together.
they'll put they'll do, yeah, I've seen that, where they'll give me like 3 names, it'll be 3 different individuals for 1 Qualiva or 3 Qualiva. But then they'll give me a whole list of names, and I'm like, it's not bad, it's just,
But when a bishop comes, sometimes he reads the names too. What is that?
so when the bishop comes, okay, so that's a good point. When the bishop comes during the great entrance, he commemorates names, living with the paten, and at the chalice, he does the dead, okay? And you'll hear him say like predecessors and say some names and stuff like that. Only technically the bishops are supposed to do that. There used to be an old tradition when your priest used to do the great entrance, they too
I
would
remember that.
commemorate.
I remember
You
that.
would say names, or you'd say the memorial names.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. That was an old tradition from the Church of Greece. But us being under Constantinople, they don't do that. You literally like what we do now. You come down, you say, may the Lord our God remember all of us in the heavenly kingdom, always now and forever. You bless the people and you turn in. You don't say those extra prayers. Those extra prayers are only supposed to be appropriated for bishops. The Church of Greece and their rubrics, which we have some of their books as well too, allows it. But I even know other churches as well too, Antioch and Serbians, whatever, but yeah. So.
You see it with the bishop.
Yeah, bishops, hey, they're the ruling shepherd. They can do whatever they want. So, that's it, everyone. Kalinita, I pray all of you have a happy and blessed, peaceful Thanksgiving with you and your families. God bless you. We'll be off for the next 2 weeks. Not next week or the following week. We'll reconvene the week of December 5th. So that 7th we'll reconvene. And then we'll meet more there. We'll discuss the rest of the month of December. So
December.
that's it. God bless you guys. Kalinita, happy Thanksgiving.